happened several years ago when I moved into a new apartment. I should mention that I'm female, and the place was older and on the edge of the city. During that time, it was all I could afford. The apartment itself was a small one-bedroom place on the 5th floor of a pretty tall building. I moved in with all my stuff, which was only a few boxes, and started to unpack. For the most part, I liked the apartment because the location was pretty good and it was enough space for me. My hallway had probably 15 or 20 other units on it. I made maybe 3 or 4 trips back and forth from my car to my apartment, bringing everything in. As I was doing this, and on the last trip I made, I saw a man leaving his room a little ways down the hallway. He was the first neighbor that I had seen. I finished bringing things in and then started unpacking. It took me basically the rest of the day to do so, and by nighttime I was all done. I didn't have to work for the next couple of days, so I got some food and stayed up late relaxing and enjoying my new place. I was up and watching TV, and I heard a knock on my door. This was strange. It was almost midnight. I got up and walked over to the door, and I looked out the peephole. It was the guy who I had seen in the hallway earlier, one of my neighbors. It seemed a little bit strange to come to my door at this hour, but I decided to answer it. The guy was pretty tall, probably like 6'5". He had glasses and hair almost to his shoulders. When I opened up the door, he said hi to me. Then, he shook my hand and introduced himself. He told me that his name was Andrew and he lived down the hallway. The guy seemed kind of awkward. The whole situation was kind of strange, but I thought that it was nice the fact that he came over to introduce himself to me. After I introduced myself back to him, we both stood there awkwardly for a few moments. Then, Andrew asked if I wanted to come over and have some coffee at his place. I told him no and said that it was late and I was going to bed. He asked if I was sure, and when I said yes, he said okay, and then I closed the door. Then I went back to what I was doing. I wasn't really that tired, but I didn't want to go to his place. I found it a little bit weird that he chose to come over and introduce himself to me so late at night. I stayed up for a while longer and then went to bed. The next day, I went out to get some groceries in the morning and was home for the rest of the day. I organized more of my things and did whatever for the rest of the day, but at night, once again, there was a knock at my front door. I got up and went to go see who it was. It was Andrew again. I opened the door to see what he wanted this time. Andrew said hi to me and then told me that he thought my mail got delivered to his place on accident. He said there was a package for me. I was a little bit confused, but curious what accidentally was delivered to him. He told me that he had it in his place, and he said we could go get it now. I said sure, and I walked out of my place and into the hallway. Then I followed Andrew down to his apartment. It was a few down from me and not that far at all. When we got to his place, he opened up the door and told me to go ahead inside. His place was somewhat dirty. He had a living room in the main area and then a bedroom off it, kind of like mine. As we walked inside, Andrew said that he kept the package in his bedroom for safekeeping. I followed him inside to the bedroom. When I got inside that room, there was far less furniture. Almost as soon as I walked in, though, Andrew suddenly moved behind me. The door then swung shut and slammed. My immediate reaction was to run over to the door and try to get out, but as I made it there, I heard a click, and when I tried opening it, the door was locked. I realized how stupid I had been. This guy already had come across as a little bit of a creep to me. How could I walk alone into his apartment late at night? I thought about how crazy his story sounded anyways. Why would he accidentally get one of my packages? I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't answer. I had my cell phone with me and I pulled it out, but there was no signaling there. Nothing would go through. I'm not sure where Andrew went, but I didn't hear him from the other side. I looked around the bedroom. There was hardly anything in there. A mattress in the corner, a rug, and a nightstand. It was a terrifying place to be. His window had a cover on it. I pulled the cover off to see if I could see anybody outside, but the window seemed to be painted black from the inside. I couldn't see out of it, and I couldn't open it either. I was desperate. I yelled and asked to be let out, but nobody answered me. I walked all around the room, wondering what I could do. There didn't seem to be anything, though. As time went by, I realized that I needed to think of something to get out of there. I kept trying my phone, and I went to all parts of the room, but I just couldn't get any signal. Finally, I went over to one of the walls. This was a wall that bordered the apartment next door. I started knocking on it, wondering if the people on the other side would hear, or if they were even home or awake. But after several minutes of that with no luck, I turned it up a notch. I started pounding on the wall as hard as I could. It started to damage it a little bit. I then took my elbow and rammed it into the wall. Some of the wall ended up breaking, and I started yelling as loud as I could and banging on the wall. After a minute or so of this, the door to the room that I was in opened. Andrew stood there inside the doorway. He yelled at me to stop, then he started approaching. I grabbed a small nightstand because it was the only thing in the room that I could grab. I held it up to defend myself. This didn't stop Andrew at all. He kept going towards me. I shoved the nightstand at him, which pushed him back a little bit, and this was just enough for me to be able to run past him and out of the room. I ran for the door, which I was barely able to get to before he grabbed me. I had the door open, but Andrew was struggling to keep me inside. I heard somebody walking down the hallway, though, into our direction, and I started screaming as loud as I could. When the person got closer, Andrew pushed me away, then he himself took off running out of the apartment and down the hallway. The person in the hallway told me that they lived next door and they were wondering what on earth was going on. I explained to her the situation as I ran back from my apartment. The police were called, and Andrew was long gone by the time they got there. However, they were able to locate him not too long after them. I'm really lucky to have gotten away, and I'm especially grateful that the neighbor decided to come over and see what was going on. When I was a kid, probably about 10 years old, my family moved into a new house. It wasn't that big of a move, but maybe like 10 minutes away from where we had lived before. My siblings and I didn't have to change schools, but the neighborhood was different. When I was a kid, I loved to be outside. Probably my favorite part of our new house was that it had a basketball hoop in the driveway. I'd always wanted one, but our old driveway was too small, and the car took up most of the space. My brother and sister did not like to go outside as much as me, so I would often be out there by myself. Our house was bigger than our old one too, and the neighborhood was busier. I was hoping that I would meet some of the neighborhood kids and make some friends. I remember that shortly after moving in there, I was outside playing basketball in the driveway and I saw a guy walking by down the street. The next day, I saw him again. I figured that he was one of the neighbors and he lived on our block. I remember noticing that he looked at me both times as he went past. Then, one day, I saw him walking down the street for the third time. This time, the man stopped at the end of our driveway and faced me. I wasn't really sure what he wanted. I kept playing basketball and looked over every few seconds or so to see if the guy was still there. He didn't move. After maybe 2 or 3 minutes, when I looked over, the guy waved at me. I waved back, but I was a little bit confused. The guy was wearing sunglasses, I remember, and for the most part seemed pretty average. He then waved me over and said hi. I started walking down the driveway to the guy, and when I reached him, he asked me if my family had just moved in. I said yes, and the man told me that he was my neighbor. He asked me how old I was, and then he told me that he had a son around my age. He said he was always trying to get his son out of the house, but he mostly just liked to stay inside and play video games. He told me that his kid would probably play basketball with me and asked if I wanted to come over and meet him. It sounded good to me. I would have loved to have a friend to play basketball with, and I told the man sure, and he told me to follow him. We both began walking down the street to the right. When we did, I expected it to be maybe a few houses down or something like that. I thought about telling the man that I had to let my parents know I was leaving. They had always told me that if I was going anywhere to ask them or to let them know, like if I was going to the local park or something. However, I felt like that would be an inconvenience, and I decided not to. We made it past a few houses, and then I saw that there was this one car parked on the side of the road. It was literally the only car that was parked on the side of the road. Most of the houses in the neighborhood had garages or longer driveways as well. There wasn't really a need to park on the street. I saw that the man was walking closer to the vehicle. This gave me a really bad feeling. Had he driven his car here? The car was a gray minivan. It was kind of old looking, I remember that. I just knew that I didn't want to get into a vehicle with this guy. My parents had always told me not to go anywhere with strangers. I thought this man was a neighbor though, and that didn't really seem like a full stranger to me. Then, as we got even closer to the van, sure enough, I remember hearing the lock click like it was unlocking. The man was holding keys. He told me to hop in when we were maybe 10 feet away. This is when I decided that I was not going to get into the guy's car. I turned right around and sprinted as fast as I could back for my house. The man did not chase after me. I think I had really taken him by surprise. I also don't think there was any chance that he would have caught me. I made it back home, ran up the driveway, and went back inside the house. For whatever reason, I didn't tell my parents about it. I think that I didn't want to get into trouble. I was much more careful than going outside after that as well. Luckily though, I never saw that man again. I believe 100% that the man didn't even live in our neighborhood at all. This story takes place when I had just recently moved into my new apartment. A really bizarre thing took place. This was almost 2 years ago now, but I will never forget it. My apartment that I was moving into was pretty new. The building was less than 10 years old, and it seemed really well maintained. It also wasn't that big. There were only a few units in each building, and there were 2 buildings total, then an office. There was a parking lot in the middle where basically everybody parked. My apartment had 1 bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. There were also 2 closets aside from the one in my bedroom. One was a standard coat closet, and the other was more maintenance, like for my water heated and things like that. After I moved all of my stuff in, which took forever, I started putting everything where it belonged. I had a moving company help me get everything transported and up to my unit. I was on the 2nd floor, so it wasn't too bad. So, the very first night, when I was setting everything up and whatnot, I was putting some things in my closet. I was trying to decide where to put everything, and at one point, I went inside the utility closet. When I was in there, I was just looking around, kind of wondering what I would put in it. I happened to notice something strange though. It was like a panel on the back corner, kind of behind the water heater. I always had a good attention to detail, and I almost didn't even notice it. This panel was rather large, and it was almost all the way on the floor. I got down on my hands and knees and examined it. The panel almost looked like a door that opened up through the wall. Beyond that wall was the next unit over. I wondered for a moment if that's in fact what it did, but I realized that that didn't make much sense. There was no handle to open it or anything like that, but when I messed around with it a little, it didn't seem that weird. I left it alone and went back to work. I was able to get a few more things organized before I called it for the night. Later on, I went to bed at probably about 10 o'clock. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I remember being wide awake and wondering why I had awoken. Normally, this didn't happen. Everything was pitch black and silent. After a few moments, though, I heard a noise. I just barely did hear it. It sounded like somebody was inside my apartment walking. I laid frozen in bed. I couldn't believe what was going on. I thought to myself, remembering if I had locked my door, and I knew that I did. Then I remembered that thing I thought looked like a door that led to the next unit over. Could that have been real? Who lived over there? Meanwhile, the footsteps got closer. Then my bedroom door started opening. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. There was nothing else I could do. I was just hoping that nothing bad would happen. Whoever was in there walked inside and took a couple of steps. Then they stopped. They stood there and didn't seem to move. This went on for a good 2 or 3 minutes. I couldn't take it anymore, and I opened my eyes. I couldn't tell who it was, but it appeared to be a man. He was standing about 10 feet away inside of my bedroom. I couldn't make out any details because of how dark it was. I closed my eyes again and just hoped that whoever this was would leave. I was confident that I hadn't made a sound and that they thought I was sleeping. Finally, whoever was there turned around and left. They walked out of the room and then back towards where they had come from. I did not hear my front door open and shut, but I did hear that closet door open and close. This confirmed it to me. I laid there for the longest time. It took me a while before I could do anything. Finally, I got up and checked all around my apartment. Everything seemed to be in place as it was when I left it. I went back to bed after that. The next day, I got up and went straight for the office. The apartment only had a couple of employees. I spoke with a woman at the front desk and let her know what had happened. She seemed pretty confused. When I confirmed to her my unit number, she told me that nobody lived in the unit next to me. I couldn't believe this. The apartment staff decided to come out and examine it. When I showed it to them, they offered to cover it up, but I made the decision to just move. This was really creepy to me, and I have the suspicion that it was somebody who worked at the apartment complex who was inside my apartment. If the unit to mine really was vacant, the staff would be the only ones with the keys. I'm not sure who exactly it was, but I just wanted to move out of there. Most of my things were still kind of packed up, and that's exactly what I did. To this day, I still wonder about that.